Welcome to the American Medical Extended Reality Member Question and Answer Series. In this series, we'll be highlighting the incredibly diverse and talented AMXRA community, one interview at a time. Join me, Dr. Mark Zhang, founder and president of AMXRA, as we learn more about medical extended reality through the perspective of AMXRA members. Okay, well, welcome to the American Medical Extended Reality Association Member Question and Answer. I'm your host, Mark Zhang, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Susan Persky of the NIH. How are you, Susan?
I'm doing well this morning. How are you, Mark?
I'm okay. Thanks so much for spending some time and also exploring some of the features of Google Meets with me. Maybe we'll have like a bonus at the end where we can show emerging technologies even in video conferencing. The format of the member Q&A is one where the goal is really to try and improve kind of the silos of medical extended reality. So highlighting members, what they do, who are they, to the other members of AMXRA. So to that end, we asked three questions. The first is, who are you? The second is, what do you do in MXR? And the third is, what are you most excited about in the field and also with American Medical Extended Reality Association? So do you agree to the rules of the game today, Dr. Persky?
I agree.
All right. Well, so there you go. Perfect. So question number one, who are you?
So I'll try not to get too philosophical with that one. In my professional life, I am a social psychologist by training. I have been working in the VR space, particularly for over 2 decades now. So I have been, sort of studying how people use VR, how people respond to different kinds of VR stimuli, and now as VR is sort of becoming increasingly a thing in the world, ways to leverage its capabilities for especially healthcare, for research, and for health education and other areas like that. I am really interested first and foremost in, figuring out what it is about the technology that's most useful to people, and figuring out how to capitalize on that. But that I think gets into the later questions. Coming back to who I am. I am the director of the Immersive Simulation Program, which is a sort of service-based research facility at NIH. We're part of the Genome Institute within NIH. And even within that, I'm part of the Social and Behavioral Research branch. And so my role there is to help my colleagues intramurally at NIH. Sometimes, we collaborate with extramural folks as well to integrate emerging tech with a focus on VR into their research and sort of help them understand, what best practices there are, trying to develop new best practices to help people along, things like that. That is about half of my job at NIH. The other half of my job at NIH, I do genomics research. So I am trying to understand how people use basically another emerging technology, sort of using one emerging tech to study another emerging tech, but how people are going to use new genomics technologies as they're emerging and making their way down the pathway into the clinic. Interestingly about genomics, when new things are developed, they tend to actually come to clinic or at least come to direct-to-consumer kind of applications really quickly, as opposed to, say, drugs. Yeah, absolutely. So, right now we're in the rise of the polygenic risk score. This idea that you can take all of your DNA, put it in a model, and understand people who are at very high risk or very low risk. We don't know much about the in-between people, I would say, quite yet. But being able to do some risk prediction for these really common complex diseases where we haven't been able to do it before. This is not a very old technology. And yet, we've been able to get it direct to consumer for years now already. I am sort of piggybacking on some other efforts by my institute to figure out, as we're thinking about bringing it to clinic, what do providers do with this? And so that's one of the ways, where I can use VR to sort of simulate future clinical interactions, what we might expect to see down the road, and then think how people will apply these genomics technologies in clinic, how they'll use them to make decisions about healthcare, whether they might introduce biases, things like that. So that's sort of a little example, but by way of sort of that, I'll explain that it's basically research around people's communication processes, their mental models of what genomics is and what it does, and health equity, are really my foci there. So those are sort of my, those are the two hats that I wear at NIH. And then I have another sort of third tiny little hat where I try to bring, a lot of those learnings to my communities. XR, I would say, is, one of my primary communities where I always want to hear about, what's new, what's going on, and try to bring, what we've learned the last, many years now to bear on, some of the new things that are popping up in XR. So basically just trying to be at the nexus and bring some of the old learnings and learn what's going on and try to help everyone integrate things together. So making bridges, maybe one of the other hats, I would say. Beyond that, I think it starts to get a little philosophical, but yeah, I would say professionally, that's who I am. Personally, I'm a mom of three, a wife, a resident of the greater Washington, D.C. area, a daughter. Don't tell my parents I forgot that one. I'm also a person in the world. So there you have it.
That's, what, it's nice to see that other side as well, who you are professionally, but also who you are as a person. I have so many questions. So before we get to stage 2, I have follow-on questions about who you are. So the first is, it's fascinating that you have like kind of these 3 hats, and the 2 kind of big hats, your peanut butter and jelly. Do you ever see are there intersections between the genomics work and the XR work? I'd love to learn more about kind of that stuff, and how you see that kind of merging or potentially merging.
Absolutely. Yeah, those things do overlap in many, many ways. So most of the research that we support in the Immersive Sim program is genomics research, and a lot of it is social behaviorally oriented. So some of these doctor-patient interactions that I've talked about. We also are working on some trainings and some educational simulations related to patient education, physician training, things like that. This is an area where the concepts are so novel and so new sometimes that, really having to do specific sort of education around them is important. And there are a few areas where I think VR in particular really has, some benefits to bear on that education. So they come together quite a lot. And it's something I'm trying to do, although I'm hoping there'll be more coming down the pike, is, anytime there's anything, in the medical XR world that has to do with genetics and genomics, I want to see it because, I'm at the Genome Institute. I am surrounded by, geneticists and clinical genetics folks, and, anything that can really interface with the mission of my institute is something that I'm really interested in. So I always am keeping an eye out for anything, relating to visualization or clinical procedures or things that are genetics oriented. If you're watching this and you know something, I want to hear about it.
I feel like that's like one of those textbook kind of glossy shots of someone in pharma or a lab inevitably wearing a AR headset, playing around with a DNA or some molecule and moving it. So I feel like there's a lot of potential opportunities from just even the modeling. That's pretty cool. Definitely.
Yeah, you would think so. It's actually sort of the bane of my existence because I keep seeing these glossy ads. This just happened to be last week where I was like, oh, they're looking at it double helix. Maybe there's an actual genetics visualization application for this tool that I should know about. And then I will either go look, or my partner in crime, his name is Chris Fortney. He's the lab manager at the ISP.
Yeah.
Or I'll be like, Chris, look at this, go check it out. And, and we'll come back and be like, nope, just a promo shot. When we really get down to it, there are a few areas that we've kind of looked at that maybe could benefit from 3D visualization, but we haven't really found that sweet spot of where it improves over existing technologies, which is what I'm always looking for. So we see those all the time, but then then often I go back and I'm like, well, nope, it was just, stock photo.
Unfortunate. So now that my second question, you have been doing this work for over 20 years. What got you into the field of XR? Like, what was that point?
So the point was actually when I started grad school. I was really interested in going to grad school for social psychology. And these were back in the days when you didn't have to know exactly what you wanted to do before you applied to grad school. And it just so happens that one of the schools I was looking at, I was interested actually in doing probably computer mediated communication. I was interested in tech for sure, but maybe in human computer interaction. I didn't totally know, but I happened to meet Professor Jim Blaskovich at University of California, Santa Barbara on a school visit. And I was just completely blown away. I didn't realize that using VR was even sort of an option for psychology, but his grad students gave me a tour of the lab. I met with him, really, really amazing guy. And I just sort of turned on a dime and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. Even though he wasn't somebody I was considering working with, he was open to me coming. And so I decided to go to grad school there and, learn all about this very, very new emerging idea that we can study human behavior in VR and, have a bunch of benefits that we wouldn't have in real life. And he had a project that he had been, I actually think he had a little grant for, that we started working on how it would affect people to play violent video games in VR. And this is the sort of heyday of the media violence research where everyone was worried about, the emerging first-person shooters and all of that. And so we were like, what if we do it in VR, right? And so that's what I did my dissertation on. It was, a great learning process. I definitely didn't want to do that kind of work anymore once I finished, but but it was, I had to program my own game, which in retrospect was, but in those days there was software developed by Andy Beal out of MIT, who he ended up at Santa Barbara and now runs a VR company in Santa Barbara called WorldViz. He was a research professor there, and it was his homegrown software we were using, and I had to learn Python. And I did it, which I think is really good for me now because I really understand, what's an option, what do you need to specify when you're thinking about building something. Because I really understand the nuts and bolts of these things, and it was really great. But it took me a year and a half to program something that any decent computer science person probably could have done in like 2 months. So looking back on it, I was kind of like, what was I doing? But I think ultimately it was really good for me. So that's kind of how I got involved in the area. And then when I finished my dissertation, I spent some time at Columbia University in the psych department, because I also do physiological measurement. So I was doing some work there. And then the group that I'm at right now at NHGRI, NIH, back in, what was this, like 2004-ish, they were like, VR sounds like a good thing for us. We want to do VR. We need to hire somebody. And in 2004, there weren't that many people they could hire. It was me or not me, pretty much. So they went with me. It was fantastic. Those early days, we set up the lab, which opened in 2006. And we've been, figuring it out and growing and, just kind of going along from there in the time since.
And this is like pre like DK1, right? DK1 was 20. So you were doing it back in the day, a real OG, or not?
Well,
for
we
this
have
cycle.
our headset still. because like, what do you do with a $25,000 headset? You don't just like
Right.
send it up to surplus. So we,
Yeah.
you know, we have them sitting around. They were quite good. They were just heavy and expensive.
Yeah.
We've left all the cameras up in the lab, so everyone thinks we're tracking them from every single angle. But really, it's just the legacy system of how we used to have to do the tracking in VR. So yeah, so we started before any of that, and we kind of started growing. You know, we bought a DK1 and a DK2, and those weren't really that much better than what we were already using. But you know, finally, probably later than most people, we did end up switching over to modern equipment several years.
Yeah. So, and this is a poll, so I may be very wrong. This is just a limitation of my knowledge of the UC system. But Santa Barbara slugs, go slugs. Is that right?
Gauchos.
Gauchos. Dang.
Yeah. Santa Cruz is slug.
Santa Cruz is slug. I knew it was a Santa. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you gotta love them all, though, man.
I'm 0 for 1 for my UC knowledge, but okay. So this is awesome. So I'm going to transition to stage 2. So we talked a little bit about what you do, but tell me more. What are the things that are like most exciting, top of mind for like the work that you're doing in the field of XR?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's most exciting for me is after sort of growing a couple of applications and approaches over, you know, the long time period, now we've really been able to branch out into all kinds of different applications. So I think just having my hands in so many different pots, you know, has been particularly exciting for me. So there are still the research applications that we've worked on, you know, for a really long time. Some of the, you know, clinical simulations I talked about, you know, those are getting better and better. We haven't yet integrated AI because until now it hasn't really been good enough for my standards anyway. But also as a research facility, like we don't want our research participants going way down different roads with conversations. We want them all to have roughly the same information. So, you know, it's been really interesting to try to figure out how to grow with the technology and where actually for us it doesn't make sense to grow with the technology. But it's, you know, so just sort of having so many things going on in so many different areas. We had also developed a, we call it the VR buffet. It's a measurement tool. So basically being able to assess food choice, you know, in real time with everything tracked, where the foods are. We finally got them modeled beautifully by University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And, you know, we know exactly what people are selecting in what order, what they're looking at, you know, like the whole process of food choice, breaking it down into micro decisions, basically, you know, has been really great getting that all developed. And we've used it several times, but now finally we are sharing it with our collaborators in other institutes and out in Oklahoma, you know, and so now starting to see like other people being able to capitalize on our work, which has been really exciting. I'm involved in several clinical projects of sort of direct development and testing of clinical use. So I've been working with the team at Cedars-Sinai on, you know, some of their work with pain. I'm with a colleague at Genome around ADHD in children and sort of brain assessment and training. I'm got some cool stuff going with a colleague of mine at the digestive diabetes, NIDDK, whatever, digestive and kidney and diabetes, and I don't know how it all goes together. But he is a methodologist and a metabolism measurement person. He does those rooms, you know, where like they measure everything that goes in and out. Yeah, he does really amazing work. His name is Kong Chen. And he was like, we should do, you know, some distraction for the kids in this metabolic testing unit, the thing that they have. And we did some pilot testing and it turns out like the measurements are even better, you know, when we introduce AR. So, you know, just sort of seeing all of the different applications around NIH where we can just kind of slide in and make things better, you know, is really cool as well. So I think just being able to like work across the whole span of what's going on in the field has been really exciting for me.
That's really cool. It's such a mix of kind of, it's, you know, you clearly have created like a niche where XR is like your kind of you're like the technologist for XR use cases and research at NIH, which is really exciting. The VR buffet is pretty cool too. Have you ever thought, or do you do things where you pair like the food with the simulation? So you could, I don't know, I'm not even sure if you can even do that, but as you pick the pizza, maybe you get like, I don't know, a wafer or something that people actually eat. I don't even know what you would actually do with that, other than I think it's like kind of cool to see how the digital and the physical could potentially combine in some future state.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that this was a long time ago now, but there was a team out of Japan somewhere that did AR cookies, where it was just like a little low calorie wafer, that in real life, but they would project cookie characteristics onto it and see if they could get people to, essentially, feel like they were eating a delicious cookie instead.
Did people think they were eating a delicious cookie?
It seemed more like a demonstration project than a research project, perhaps. So I'm not totally sure. Maybe more work has been done since then. But just like keeping track of that stuff has been really cool. We have done some integration of scent in the buffet to sort of see, if it added. The one paper that we wrote about that was kind of interesting actually, because it seems like really low. Like, you have a buffet, you need scent. Where we put like French fry oil smell in the room when people were in the buffet. It was really interesting because my research assistants, I mean, it was awful. They were just like, oh, this French fry smell, I'm like choking on it, it's horrible. And then participants didn't necessarily notice, and we were like, oh, that's really weird. So we decided to start keeping track and asking people if they noticed, and if they noticed, what did it smell like? And only something like 17% of our participants noticed it. Which we were just shocked, because for us it was just, we did a few tests. We made sure like, the headset's not blocking your nose, making sure that it was not anything physical. But it turned out if people smelled it, they knew exactly what it was. So they reported it was either fried food or French fries or something like that. And the people who did report smelling it had higher levels of presence in the environment. So it was kind of a cool, chicken or egg situation for sure. But it's kind of a cool thing to think about.
I wonder, did you ever get a sense of the folks that didn't report it but were in VR? Was it because it was like almost expected? Do you know what I mean? Like it was like,
I don't know. No, but we never sort of probed in terms of like why. We actually have a whole protocol all ready to go. With essentially that experiment. But just now we are starting to move towards like being able to do studies unmasked and things like that. So COVID certainly put a big kibosh on a lot of the, the olfactory research. But I don't know. I'm interested. I have a protocol ready to go. I have a couple other things I have to do first, but we may dig into that.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. Also, the concept of a wafer cookie, like, I'm waffling between, is that like, some dystopian future where we're just eating like sustenance bricks with a digital overlay, or could there be like some real interesting kind of applications for research and frankly even just like health in the future with something like that? I don't know.
It's probably both.
Yeah, it's probably both. Well, I look forward to the future where we could share digital meat cubes of soy in a metaverse or something like that.
Me too, because I'm a vegetarian, so sharing soy cubes sounds delightful to me.
That sounds good. All right, we're heading into stage 3. So the last question is, what is most exciting to you about kind of MXR, and also what do you want to see from AMXRA as a I don't know what your member number is, Susan, but I think you're pretty early. You're definitely under 100. You may be under 50. I think we might have looked at one point, and I can't remember. But
I don't remember it either. I was satisfied. I remember that.
You were satisfied, yeah. What's most exciting about the field, and also what do you want to see with AMXRA moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much exciting about the field. I think the creativity that people are starting to show now that we've gotten some of the low-hanging fruit sort of settled to some extent. You know, I think is really exciting. I think the influx of new people has been really exciting. I just last week at the Society for Behavioral Medicine was part of a symposium with 3 early career researchers I had never met before, all doing you know, VR, AR pilot projects for treating, you know, clinical problems, you know, real patient populations, and they had amazing study designs, great measurement approaches. You know, seeing what new entrants to this area can do has been really exciting. You know, and really getting some of the hard data that, you know, I think we need to really make this go. You know, has been great to see that starting to really bubble up. I mean, obviously we'll need, you know, more funding and all of that to really get to where we want to be, but I feel like things are starting to move, and that's really exciting to me. You know, I think for a long time we've done sort of the usual suspects, though, you know, the people who wanted to be early adopters, where we would hang a flyer and say, hey, VR study, and people who are interested in that would come. You know, I think we're to the point now where we need to start saying, okay, well, it's not just the people who walk through our door when we say VR, you know, what about everybody else? So I think that's something that I'm hoping that, you know, AMXRA can sort of help us think through, and how to reach, you know, new populations, make sure that the work we are doing is equitable. You know, attending to those sorts of issues on the relatively early side, although I think we're mature enough now that it's time to really should be doing a lot more of this. You know, so that's one thing, definitely. And I think just bringing people together who are doing similar things but don't know each other. I mean, I think we need more community. We need more crosstalk. As you alluded to at the beginning, lots of silos. It's interesting, the silos are kind of different in different places. So, you know, some people siloed by, you know, what kind of hardware they use. Some people by, you know, the condition they treat. Some people just by, you know what I mean? So you know, by discipline, for example. So I think, you know, starting to see this coming together is a really great thing. And I, you know, my colleagues who aren't as sort of VR centric, I always will say, like, if I can spend an hour on the phone with you and save you 3 weeks of work, you know, looking into hardware, software, best practices, that kind of thing, like, I'm happy to do it. So I think just building more of that community for people who are new to this. You know, there's less recreating the wheel, there's less, you know, recreating the same experience for, I think we talked about this for a new hospital, right? Where it's like everybody has their own version of, you know, the CT scan or the MRI trainer, you know, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think just creating that place for people to come and see what's been done, talk to people who've done it, I think is really important and great. We have a long way to go still. We have a lot of
still a long way. Still a long way. I mean, like, this is 9 months or so, right? So still getting started. Well, you've been doing this for like you know, 2 decades, and the technology, like, where do you see the technology from where you started to now, and what like, where do you see it going in the future?
I mean, I think the trend is always lighter, smaller, you know, etc. All of that. I think interestingly, we spend a lot of time talking about AR versus VR and a little bit MR, but like, I think most people are of the opinion that eventually it'll all be there. You know, it's sort of, we'll hit the whole continuum, and then we won't have to worry so much. I mean, I get people asking me all the time, like, should this be AR or VR? And I'm like, well, from your use case, it should be pretty clear. I mean, they're very different.
Yeah.
But I think that's all gonna, you know, that and all the sensor technology and everything else going on, you know, needs to converge, and it will converge. And for some people, it will converge in the metaverse, and for other people, it'll converge in other ways. But so many exciting ways to see all of this technology come together. Great for medicine, great for research where we have really well-established, guidelines, ramps, places where we know how to do privacy and security and, what to do with people's data. Little scary when we move outside of those sort of well-regulated areas, thinking about all the ways that we could become the next, M Health. Not to, disparage M Health, but, you go on the App Store if you want, something for your anxiety and choose from 1,000 apps, and half of them are probably harvesting your data.
Yeah. And even the ones that are validated based on whatever terms that you probably didn't read and just agreed to wholesale are explicitly harvesting your data with your consent, right? Like,
everybody's harvesting your data. It's just whether they're giving you a benefit or not.
That's exactly it. And then you think about just like with these new technologies, just how much data could be harvested and how personal, and it's an interesting. These are some tricky wickets, I suppose, is maybe the.
They are. I mean, and certainly, with all of the questions up in the air around, what FDA is going to do and what regulation is going to look like, and, no legislation really to speak of. I think our colleagues in the wellness space are going to have to deal with these issues. And so that, I think this is definitely going to be a tricky area.
Do you think that kind of XR is, do you think this is going to happen in series? In some ways, I think the M Health is still kind of, frankly, being defined. And, some of the, I think the progress is being made, but progress is being made on some of the bones of some of the leaders before. I think some of the pioneer digital therapeutics have had some hard times, and I don't think that means that DTX is going to go away. I think they're just paving the path for the future, and in many ways I wonder how XR, whether it's going to be if that's going to be positive tailwinds, or if they're going to have to pave their own path. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know either. I do think a lot of the applications I've been seeing for XR, I feel like the ones that have been part of more of a wraparound approach that probably includes an app or, something that's a little more holistic. I mean, I think those are often, to my mind, ones that are sort of more well thought out and, really, aiming to address everything about a condition or about their indication. So I do see things potentially coming together and sort of having components of each, and that being maybe the best of all possibilities. But I don't, obviously that won't be everything. But I'm hoping there'll be some,
Yeah, no, it's really great that you bring that up about this concept of pairing kind of an XR technology with another tool like a web app or a mobile app, because at the end of the day, XR is another modality, and it might be the right modality for a specific use case, but being able to pair it with something else for other touch points, I feel like that's a really interesting area that's still kind of early days, with these companion apps and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
On the consumer side.
Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised by how early days it is there. I would have thought that would have been an obvious way to go. Because I mean, we're not wearing headsets around in our lives right now. Right. And the friction of getting the headset on, remembering to do that. I mean, if you just need to remember that, okay, fine. But someone like me is not going to remember that. I need a ping to get to my dentist appointment this morning. So, it's interesting to me that there isn't more of that. But also the apps are early, right? We're just figuring out how they work in our established system. So, but I do think we'll see more of that, and I think the more we can sort of bring those things together and do the stuff in XR that belongs in XR and do the rest of it outside, at least for now, I think that makes the most sense.
Oh, I love that. That should be like on a T-shirt. Do XR things that belong in XR. That feels and sounds like a truth, like a law, like the Persky law, right? Like, you know,
I don't think I'm the first one to say it, but
well,
I think I it.
I believe that this is going to be this is recorded and will be posted publicly. So, frankly, I feel like that makes it a like legal binding thing, right? So,
Okay.
but I think that it's, to me, there's a lot of truth in that, right? Understanding it's not a panacea. There are use cases that make sense and use cases that are not going to make sense, and threading that needle. And importantly, I also think the other piece of that I think um, we both kind of implied, but explicitly, is you can't throw the baby with the bathwater, right? Like, you can't think of the hype and not see the underlying kind of true utility that these technologies bring even now. Because I think that gets conflated a lot, right? The promise versus the reality. And then seeing that the promise doesn't meet the reality and then just throwing it all away, when frankly the reality is actually useful. And it'll get there. We'll get there. That's the goal.
We'll get there. I mean, and this is longstanding. I mean, I've been giving tours of our facility for as long as it's been open. And even in the early days, people would come in and be, dissatisfied that they weren't in the matrix, right?
Yeah.
Because like, oh, it's a medical facility, you have top of the line hardware, like it's going to be so cool. And frankly, it was cool, but it was not the matrix. And so it really, we have to sort of temper expectations. And something I learned really early on in the research is it's not all about how good it looks. I mean, the fullness of it, the sort of psychological realism, the ability to influence you, or the ability to capture your attention. It's not all about how good it looks. That may not matter in a lot of cases. And so it might not look like as good as some of the AAA VR video games coming out right now, but that's okay, because it might still work just fine.
Still might, unless it's a virtual chocolate chip cookie. Then I think that's like highest end foveated rendering. The chocolate chips have to gleam, and then when I take a bite in that tasteless soy wafer, I want it to just pop with the sensation of. And that's when you program the smell of chocolate, a bakery, and that is how I'm going to get to I'm going to get fit, is by eating virtual chocolate chip.
We have 2 of my projects involve virtual chocolate chip cookies. I don't know if you knew
really
this, but it is actually a center point in one of my patient education VR experiences. And I will tell you, it does not matter. They look good. They are photorealistic cookies, and we want cookies constantly. Every time we finish doing some sort of testing or what, we're just like, can someone run down to the coffee shop and get some cookies? Because we've all been looking at virtual cookies for the last,
What if so I feel like maybe we should pause the recording, because I think this is good stuff. This is gold. What if it was a virtual cookie, but you made the physical cookie taste bad? What if the cookie tasted like garbage, and then you train yourself to eat these Garbo virtual cookies, and now you've basically reverse Pavloved yourself, and then let's put it all together. Then we combine it with clearly a very high production mobile application to remind you to eat your Garbo cookie. We'll call it Garbo cookies, and then 3 times a day you put on your headset, and then you eat a QR. Your headset will recognize a QR coded wafer that tastes like just pure garbage, but it looks like a delicious Chips Ahoy cookie or whatever brand. We're brand agnostic, and you just train yourself to eat that until you realize that I am not a cookie eater. I do not want these things. They taste very bad, and that is how, again, I get to my ideal fit. I get fit is through Garbo cookies, the VR solution and app.
So I also do research on genetics of eating behavior and weight management, and I'm going to suggest that is not a healthy approach. However, if we could get someone to manufacture the cookies with all of your prescription medications, all your
Yeah.
vitamins, maybe a good amount of fiber in there, and we can make you think you taste awesome, then I'm on board for that.
Interesting. So it's like there's those breakfast cookie things or like the cookie meal replacement, but just put a ton of just put a ton of meds in them, and then and then make them look like the most delicious cookie in VR. There you go. I think we're these. We shouldn't just jump to solutions, but I think these are the solutions for the 21st century. So I guess with that, Susan, it's been a real pleasure. How can people get of course people can get a hold of you. AMXRA members can get a hold of you through AMXRA, the platform. But for others, how can they get a hold of you? Like, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, the good thing about working for the government is all of my contact information is splashed all over the internet. So anyone can get in contact with me. I have a website at genome.gov. On LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter. You can just come find me any which way. There's more than one Susan Persky in the world, but I'm the only one at NIH.
Perfect. So there's more than one Susan Persky in the world, but only one in NIH. And the intersection of genomics and XR, that's what you want to hear. Perfect. Well, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much. And I'll see you on the AMXRA, the virtual halls of AMXRA. See ya.
All right. Thanks.
This has been a production of the American Medical Extended Reality Association. Our mission is to advance the science and practice of medical extended reality through advancing care delivery, scientific investigation, innovation, education, advocacy, and community. If you are interested in learning more or joining AMXRA, please go to www.amxra.org to learn more. Bye now.